The challenge. The cold emptiness of space stretched on, as vast and unfeeling as the universe itself. At the far reaches of the galaxy, the human fleet prepared for the battle of a lifetime. On Earth, cities bustled with life, unaware of the threat that loomed over them. A chilling message had just been broadcast to all of humanity, an ultimatum from the Zorvans, the galaxy's most feared and ruthless species. You have no place in the galaxy. The voice of the Zorvan leader echoed in the minds of every human, both across the Earth and in space. Surrender now, or face total annihilation. The message was sent with cold indifference, as though they were speaking to a lesser species, one already doomed to fail. The Zorvans had crushed countless civilizations, enslaved entire planets, and left nothing but ashes in their wake. They believed humanity was no different, just another insignificant species destined to fall. On Earth, the message sent shockwaves through governments and military leaders. Panic spread like wildfire, but amidst the fear, one woman stood calm. Commander Ava Sinclair, the leader of Earth's military fleet, had seen fear before, and she knew how to turn it into something else. Determination. The humans had never encountered a species like the Zorvans. Their warships were enormous, sleek, and built from materials that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Yet Ava knew that every species had a weakness. The Zorvans might be invincible in the eyes of others, but not in her eyes. She would find a way to fight back. As she stood on the bridge of the flagship Eagle's Pride, Ava looked out the massive windows into the dark void of space. Her crew watched silently, sensing the tension in the air. The Zorvans had only given Earth one option: submit or perish. The challenge was clear. "We won't surrender," Ava said firmly, her voice cutting through the silence. "We will not fall without a fight. Prepare for war." Her crew exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no hesitation in their actions. They trusted her. They trusted humanity's strength to rise above impossible odds. The fleet had been training for a situation like this for years. The Zorvans may have been powerful, but humanity had something they didn't: a fierce will to survive, and the drive to fight until the very end. Across the solar system, military forces scrambled into position. The human fleet was nowhere near as large as the Zorvan armada, but the humans had one advantage. They knew their home turf. Earth's fleet was made up of smaller, faster ships, able to maneuver through the asteroid belts, jump through the moons of Mars, and hide in the rings of Saturn. It was a risky strategy, but it was all they had. Meanwhile, deep within the heart of the Zorvan fleet, their leader, the Supreme Commander Rylak, stood in front of a massive holographic map of the galaxy. His fleet was ready. The humans were nothing more than a speck, a nuisance, and Rylak wasn't concerned about them. To him, the idea of humanity even thinking they could stand against the Zorvans was laughable. "Let them fight," Rylak muttered to his subordinates, his voice dripping with arrogance. "They'll regret defying us. We will wipe them from existence." But what Rylak didn't know was that humanity's resolve had been underestimated. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the chance to prove to the galaxy that they were more than just another species to be crushed underfoot. Back on Earth, the situation was growing direr by the hour. The Zorvans had already begun their march towards Earth, their ships creating a wall of darkness as they pushed closer. The human fleet was being pulled into position for what would undoubtedly be a catastrophic battle. Ava and her crew had one goal: hold them off as long as possible and give Earth's governments time to prepare. But Ava knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about sending a message. The galaxy would see humanity's strength. They would see that no one, not even the most feared species in the universe, could break the human spirit. The first wave of Zorvan ships entered Earth's atmosphere, their massive forms blocking out the stars. The fleet's sensors beeped as the ships neared. Ava's hands tightened on the control panel, but she didn't falter. She had trained for moments like this. They had no backup. There was no other fleet to call for help. Earth was on its own, but Eva believed that humanity could defy even the most impossible odds. "Commander," Lieutenant Hawkins said from his station, "they're almost within striking range. What are your orders?" Ava took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, there was no time to second-guess. "We fight. All ships, engage at will. Don't hold back." With her command, the first shots of war rang out. The sky above Earth lit up as human weapons clashed against the Zorvans' advanced armor. Sparks flew, debris scattered, and the stars above seemed to tremble. It was the beginning of a battle that would change the course of history. As the fleet engaged in battle, Ava's thoughts raced. The Zorvans were strong, but humanity was determined. They might have the numbers, the technology, and the experience, but humanity had something the Zorvans would never understand: an unbreakable spirit. The fight had just begun, and already both sides knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The battle was underway. The silence of space was shattered by the sounds of blasters and the explosive crashes of ships colliding. As Earth's fleet charged into battle, they were faced with a grim realization. This was no ordinary fight. The Zorvans were every bit as deadly as the rumors had suggested, and their warships were like nothing the humans had ever encountered before. Ava Sinclair's hands gripped the control panel tightly as the Eagle's Pride rocketed forward. She could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, but there was no time for fear. The first wave of Zorvan ships was already firing on the human fleet, their advanced energy weapons cutting through the smaller human ships with terrifying efficiency. It was like watching ants try to fight off a lion. But Ava wasn't going to let the human spirit be crushed so easily. "Return fire. All ships, engage," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere on the bridge. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Lasers, missiles, and ion cannons fired in unison, but the Zorvan ships barely flinched. Their shields absorbed most of the blasts, and their heavy armor rendered many of the humans' weapons ineffective. The human fleet was fast and nimble, but it was becoming clear that speed alone wouldn't be enough. "We're losing ships," Lieutenant Hawkins shouted as another human vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The explosion was followed by the quiet vacuum of space, where the wreckage slowly drifted away. Ava's heart sank as she watched the destruction unfold, but there was no time to mourn. "Stay focused," she said, her voice firm. "We can't afford to panic now." The Zorvans, meanwhile, were in no hurry. They were methodical, slowly picking off the human ships one by one. Their fleet's firepower was overwhelming, and the human forces were struggling to keep up. The Zorvans weren't just attacking. They were toying with the humans, playing with their prey before delivering the final blow. On the Zorvan flagship, Supreme Commander Relak watched the battle unfold with a cruel smirk on his face. The humans were putting up a decent fight, but it was clear to him that they were outmatched. This would be over soon. The Zorvans had conquered countless civilizations, and the idea that these primitive humans could stand against them was laughable. "They're more persistent than I expected," Relak muttered to his subordinates, but his tone was filled with disdain. "No matter. Let them waste their ammunition. We'll crush them soon enough." As the Zorvans continued their assault, Ava knew that the longer the fight went on, the more her fleet would be at a disadvantage. The Zorvans had the numbers, the technology, and the firepower. What they didn't have, however, was the one thing humanity was known for: the ability to adapt, innovate, and fight with everything they had. Ava's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She had to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. She knew that the human fleet was outclassed in terms of raw power, but perhaps they had another weapon, something the Zorvans didn't expect. "Lieutenant Hawkins, can we pull them into the asteroid field near Mars?" Ava asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The asteroid field was dense and dangerous, a perfect place to break up the Zorvan formation. "It's possible," Hawkins replied. glancing at his screen. But it's a risky move. The field's tricky to navigate, and we'd be flying blind. If we get caught in there, it could be disastrous. I know, but it's the only option we've got, Ava said. If we can get them off the open battlefield, we can use their arrogance against them. They think they're untouchable. Let's prove them wrong. Without waiting for further argument, Ava gave the order. Move the fleet into the asteroid field. Now. The human ships veered sharply to the side, heading toward the dense asteroid field that surrounded Mars. The Zorvans, surprised by the sudden change in direction, hesitated for a moment, their massive ships trying to adjust to the unexpected maneuver. But the Zorvans were not accustomed to this type of tactic. They were used to fighting in open space, where their superior firepower and advanced technology gave them the upper hand. But here, in the labyrinth of asteroids, the Zorvans were out of their element. The human ships zipped through the field, dodging asteroids, weaving between rocks, and using the chaos of the environment to their advantage. The Zorvans, in contrast, struggled to keep up. Their large ships were too slow to maneuver effectively, and the asteroid field played havoc with their sensors. The Zorvan shields flickered and sputtered as stray asteroid fragments collided with their hulls. This is our chance, Ava said, her eyes narrowing. Let's hit them hard. The human fleet, now fully embedded in the asteroid field, turned and launched another barrage of fire. The Zorvans, now disoriented and vulnerable, were unable to react in time. The human ships unleashed everything they had, firing lasers, missiles, and plasma bombs into the Zorvan fleet. The Zorvans, caught off guard by the humans' sudden agility and determination, began to fall back. Ava watched in disbelief as one of the Zorvan warships exploded, a massive burst of light filling the dark expanse of space. It was the first victory humanity had seen in this battle. For a moment, the tide had turned. But Ava knew they couldn't stop now. The Zorvans would regroup, and if they weren't careful, the humans' fleeting advantage would be lost. All ships, stay sharp. Keep moving. Don't let up now, she ordered. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear. Humanity had just shown the Zorvans that they were not to be underestimated. And this was only the beginning of the fight. The galaxy's most feared species had made a grave mistake, and now the humans were ready to prove they could fight. And win. The Zorvans were not used to being challenged. For centuries, their species had reigned supreme, conquering worlds with unmatched technology and brutal efficiency. But something had shifted. The humans, with their tenacity and resourcefulness, had caught them off guard. Ava Sinclair could feel it in the air. This battle was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most feared species. As the human fleet continued to navigate the treacherous asteroid field near Mars, Ava could hear the rhythmic hum of the ship's engines as they accelerated, evading the Zorvan blasts that continued to rain down from above. The asteroid field had given them the upper hand for now, but Ava knew it wouldn't last forever. The Zorvans would adapt, and they would come for the humans again, with even more fury than before. "Lieutenant Hawkins, how are we holding up?" Ava asked, her voice filled with concern as she scanned the flashing red lights on the control panel. The ship's shields were holding strong, but the constant barrage of fire was taking its toll. Hawkins turned from his console, his expression tense. "We've lost a few ships in the asteroid field, but we're still in the game." The Zorvans are getting frustrated, though. They're beginning to adjust their tactics. Ava nodded grimly. "We need to take advantage of this. We can't afford to let them regroup. Get me a direct line to Fleet Command." "Yes, Captain." A few moments later, Ava's screen blinked, and the face of Admiral Richard Graves appeared on the communication screen. His expression was serious, but there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. The human fleet had done better than anyone expected. "Ava, good work out there," the Admiral said, his voice filled with a rare sense of pride. "But we need to take this to the next level. The Zorvans are regrouping. They're not going to stay down for long. We're aware of that, sir, Ava replied. We've caused some damage, but we need to hit them with everything we've got. We can't let them recover. Agreed, the Admiral said, leaning forward in his chair. We've been monitoring their fleet's communication. We believe they have a weak spot in their formation, near the rear of their fleet. If we can exploit that, we may be able to cripple their command ship, take out their leadership, and the rest of their forces will scatter. Ava's eyes lit up with determination. We're on it. Send me the coordinates. Good luck, Captain. We'll be watching from here. The line went dead, and Ava turned to her crew. She could see the resolve in their eyes. There was no turning back now. This battle was far from over, but the humans had the element of surprise on their side. The Zorvans had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. All ships, listen up. Ava's voice rang out over the comms. We've got one chance to end this. We know where their weak point is. We're going for it. Full speed ahead. The fleet's remaining ships surged forward, their engines roaring as they broke free from the asteroid field and headed directly for the Zorvan command ship. Ava could see the large warships of the Zorvans in the distance, their sleek forms dominating the battlefield. But in the rear of their formation, there it was, a small gap between their ships, a vulnerability that had been left open by their own arrogance. Keep your formations tight, Ava shouted as she prepared to make the final push. If we miss this shot, we'll be finished. Stay with me, people. The Zorvans, sensing the shift in tactics, attempted to close the gap. But it was too late. Ava's fleet was already in motion, and they weren't going to stop. As the human ships accelerated toward the Zorvan command ship, the Zorvans fired their weapons in desperation. Explosions rocked the space around them, but the humans held steady, dodging the blasts with their superior maneuverability. Ava's ship, the Eagle's Pride, led the charge, weaving through the hail of fire and into the heart of the Zorvan formation. The Zorvan fleet was caught off guard. The humans, using their speed and precision, slipped into the gap, reaching the rear of the formation before the Zorvans could react. Ava's heart pounded as she locked onto the command ship. The human ships unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts, hitting the Zorvan command ship with unrelenting force. The Zorvans attempted to raise their shields, but it was too late. The human firepower was overwhelming. The command ship's shields flickered and failed, and in a flash of light, the ship exploded, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. Ava watched as the massive Zorvan ship disintegrated into thousands of pieces, a clear sign that humanity had struck a decisive blow. The Zorvan forces, now leaderless and in chaos, began to scatter. Ships turned and fled, unable to continue their assault without proper coordination. "We did it," Lieutenant Hawkins shouted, a mix of relief and triumph in his voice. Ava breathed a sigh of relief, but she knew they couldn't stop yet. The Zorvans may have lost their command ship, but they were still a powerful force. They needed to push forward and finish what they had started. "Keep after them," Ava ordered, her voice steady. "We've taken out their leader. Now we finish the fight." As the human fleet chased down the fleeing Zorvans, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, the most feared species in the galaxy was retreating, and the humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated. But Ava Sinclair knew this was just the beginning. The Zorvans had tasted defeat, and they would not forget it. The war had only just begun, and humanity was ready for whatever came next. The dust was still settling from the explosion of the Zorvan command ship. The remnants of the once mighty warship drifted through space like debris from a forgotten battle. Ava Sinclair stood on the bridge of the Eagle's Pride, staring at the chaos unfolding before her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she processed the magnitude of their victory. The Zorvans had lost their command ship, their leadership, and in a single blow, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. However, despite the triumph, a sinking feeling gnawed at Ava's gut. The Zorvans weren't a species to give up easily. The battle had just begun, And Ava knew the cost of victory was not always immediate. "Captain, we've got a problem." Lieutenant Hawkins's voice cut through her thoughts, pulling her back to reality. He was standing by the communications panel, his face pale as he stared at the flashing red lights on the screen. "The Zorvans are regrouping. They've deployed reinforcements. A second fleet is en route." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped the Zorvans would scatter in disarray after losing their command ship, but now it was clear. This war was far from over. The Zorvans would not stop until they wiped out humanity, and they had the resources to do so. "How long until they arrive?" Ava asked, her voice calm despite the rising tension. "Less than an hour," Hawkins replied, his voice tight with concern. "We don't have much time." "Prepare for the worst," Ava said, her mind racing. The humans had delivered a heavy blow, but the Zorvans would return stronger, angrier, and more determined. They would come back in force. The question was whether humanity could stand its ground long enough to survive the coming storm. Ava turned to the rest of her crew, their faces grim as they processed the news. Despite their victory, the fear in their eyes was evident. This battle, while monumental, was just the first in what would likely be a long and brutal conflict. "All ships, status report," Ava ordered. "I want to know how everyone is holding up." "We've sustained damage, Captain," Commander Petra Vega, the tactical officer, reported. "Nothing we can't repair, but it'll take time. The asteroid field worked in our favor, but the Zorvans are adapting. We can expect them to come at us with everything they've got." Ava nodded. "We need to get ready. We can't afford to let them regroup." "Captain, we've got a message from Fleet Command," Hawkins interjected. He punched a few buttons on the console, and Admiral Graves's face appeared on the screen. "Ava, I've been monitoring your progress," the Admiral said, his voice steady, but filled with the gravity of the situation. "You've done incredible work out there, but the Zorvans are not backing down. We're sending reinforcements, but it'll be a while before they arrive. You and your fleet need to hold the line until then." "We'll do what we can, sir," Ava replied. "But their second fleet is already on its way. We don't have much time." Graves's expression hardened. "I know, but you've proven something important today, Captain. The Zorvans have never faced an opponent like you. Don't let them forget that. We'll support you, but right now you're the tip of the spear. Hold the line, and we'll finish this." The transmission ended, leaving Ava alone with the weight of the situation. She turned to her crew, her voice firm. "We're not done yet," she said. "The Zorvans are coming back, and they'll hit us harder than before. But we've shown them that we can stand against them. We've made them bleed. Now we finish what we started." The crew nodded, a renewed sense of determination in their eyes. They had taken on the galaxy's most feared species and won, against all odds. But Ava knew that one victory wouldn't be enough. The Zorvans would not stop until they destroyed humanity, and the humans had to be ready for whatever came next. "Prepare all weapons," Ava commanded. "Set course for the Zorvan fleet. We're not running from this fight." As the Eagle's Pride and the rest of the human fleet prepared for the inevitable clash, Ava felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. She knew the stakes were higher now than ever before. The Zorvans had just experienced what it was like to lose control. But the real test was coming. This next battle would determine whether humanity could continue to survive in the face of overwhelming odds, or whether they would be swept aside by a force greater than they could ever imagine. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. It wouldn't happen again. "We've got one shot at this," Ava muttered to herself as she watched the stars ahead of her. "And we're taking it." As the Eagle's Pride charged forward, Ava's resolve hardened. The Zorvans had learned the cost of underestimating humanity, but humanity had not yet learned what the true cost of war would be. And now they would find out. The stars stretched out in front of Ava Sinclair as the Eagle's Pride surged forward through the dark void of space. Every ship in her fleet was ready, their weapons primed and shields at maximum strength. The tension was palpable on the bridge as the crew prepared for what could be the final showdown between humanity and the Zorvans. The Zorvan fleet had arrived, their ships gliding through space like massive predators stalking their prey. Thousands of battle-hardened soldiers and officers were aboard those ships, each one ready to exact revenge on the species that had humiliated them. The Zorvans had lost their command ship, their symbol of dominance, but they weren't just coming back for vengeance. They were coming to finish what they had started. "We've got company, Captain." Commander Vega's voice cut through the tense silence. "The Zorvans are forming a battle line. They're preparing to engage." Ava stood still for a moment, staring at the display in front of her. The fleet was massive, a sight that would have caused most to freeze in fear. But not her. Not her crew. The Zorvans were a formidable enemy, but humanity had already proven they could stand their ground. "Lock all weapons on the lead ship," Ava ordered, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We take down their flagship first. It's the key to breaking their morale." "Understood," Vega replied, her fingers flying over the console. "Weapons systems are locked, Captain." "Prepare for the fight of our lives," Ava said softly, mostly to herself. She took a deep breath and turned to face her crew, who were all locked in with their own tasks. "We've faced worse odds before. We've lost ships. We've lost good people. But today we're going to make them regret ever thinking they could defeat us." As she spoke, the ship rocked slightly, a reminder that the battle had already begun. The Zorvans were firing, their massive cannons launching waves of energy blasts toward the Eagle's Pride and the other human ships in formation. But Ava and her crew had learned well. They had trained for this moment, and they wouldn't give up easily. "Shields holding at 90%, Captain," Lieutenant Hawkins called out, his eyes wide with focused determination. "But they're coming in hard. We'll need to act fast." "Return fire. Full power to our weapons," Ava barked. "Let's show them why they never should have picked a fight with humanity." The Eagle's Pride unleashed its own barrage of energy blasts, each shot finding its mark against the Zorvan ships. The fleet had clearly underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and fight back. Every blast, every strike, was a reminder that humanity was no longer just a target for the Zorvans to eliminate. On the battle screens, Ava watched as the first Zorvan ship began to break apart, its shields failing under the onslaught of fire from the human fleet. The Eagle's Pride dodged a particularly deadly blast, banking sharply to the left and sending a volley of missiles at the Zorvan flagship. The missiles connected, and the flagship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, lighting up the surrounding space like a star-going supernova. "We did it," Commander Vega shouted, punching the air in victory. But Ava knew it wasn't over. This was only one battle in the greater war. The Zorvans might have lost their flagship, but they were still a powerful force. "Don't get too comfortable," Ava warned. "There's more where that came from. They're coming for us now. We need to keep the pressure on." The Zorvans, enraged by the loss of their flagship, retaliated with fury. Their remaining ships moved into a tight formation, their energy weapons charging up for a final assault. Ava could see the determination in the Zorvan fleet's movements. This would be the final act of defiance before the battle reached its inevitable climax. "Braced for impact," Ava ordered, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the situation. "This is it." The Eagle's Pride shuddered as the first wave of Zorvan fire hit their shields. The bridge crew gritted their teeth, every moment feeling like an eternity. Ava's heart raced in her chest as she gripped the edge of her command chair, watching the battle unfold in front of her. The Zorvans were relentless, but humanity had something they didn't: the will to fight, the strength to survive. "We've taken too much damage," Vega reported urgently, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Shields are down to 30%. We need to end this now." Ava's mind raced as she analyzed the situation. The Zorvans were desperate, but there was one thing they hadn't expected: humanity's ability to turn the tide in the most unexpected ways. And she had one final move left. Initiate the Alpha Strike Protocol, Ava commanded. Alpha Strike, Captain, Hawkins asked, his eyebrows raised. Are you sure? Do it, Ava snapped. The Alpha Strike Protocol had been a last resort strategy, one that used the full force of the fleet's energy reserves to unleash a devastating single burst of firepower. It was a move that could either win the battle or destroy everything. As the countdown to the Alpha Strike began, Ava looked out at the battle unfolding before her. Every ship in the fleet was now in position. This was the final gamble. There was no turning back now. Fire, Ava shouted. The ships in her fleet unleashed a massive wave of energy, and the blast tore through the heart of the Zordan fleet, annihilating their remaining ships in a chain reaction of explosions. The darkness of space was briefly illuminated by the light of 1,000 dying warships. Silence followed. For a moment, it felt like the entire universe held its breath. Then, Ava's voice broke the quiet. We did it, she whispered, not just to her crew, but to herself. We've won. But Ava knew that the war was far from over. The Zorvans would retreat, regroup, and come back. But humanity had shown them something they would never forget: the cost of underestimating the human spirit. This was just the beginning.